What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? We are live here at Couz's Corner, what I like to call Couz's Corner Happy Hour. We are joined by two special guests. I think we have a little bit to talk about, gentlemen.
I think we do.
Yeah, crazy week.
It is, definitely. Two ACC guys in the house. I did try to get somebody from the PAC to join us tonight as well, but unfortunately was not able to do so because I threw this together kind of last minute. But I think every college football creator in America is doing a show tonight, so tough to get guests. But anyway, I appreciate these guys. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with the gentleman to my left. I guess you're all's right. JJ, go ahead.
Yeah, so JJ Kitchen. You can catch me on YouTube at Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen, or you can find me on on Twitter at JJ_Kitchen40.
And go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, TJ Pittenger. Find me anywhere, TJ_Pittenger, or my show is Double Fries, No Slaw, YouTube, podcast, social media, wherever. Usually covering FSU, but we've done a lot of conference realignment, which I'm sure we'll talk about tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, both of these guys, but JJ, TJ, if I screw up the initials at some point during the show, apologize. And
Tough one.
And before anybody asks, I am not wearing a Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket shirt, okay?
Is that West Virginia State?
No, it's a Little League team I used to coach.
Oh, no way.
Rec League team, yeah. And I still have the T-shirt, man. So.
That's hilarious.
Comfortable. I just now realized that. I was like, man, they can see this yellow jacket on my shirt. I guarantee somebody would have brought it up in the comments. So, well, let's get started. First of all, first big story of the day occurred earlier in the day, and that was the big meeting that the Pac-12 CEO group had regarding the. Actually, you know what, TJ, since you're only on here for a few minutes, let's flip this thing around. Let's touch on the Florida State thing first, okay? Because I want to get to this before you have to jump off. I want to respect your time. So, this afternoon, about 6 p.m. Eastern time, Florida State's board chair, is it Michael Collins? Is that right? TJ, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Mike Collins. He was interviewed on a show called War Chant TV, who covers Florida State, and took some very poignant questions and gave some very poignant answers. So, TJ, I'm just going to go over the notes here and let me give you your thoughts. Here are some of the takeaways. He said they were focused on a certain set of variables and achieving those variables, but he wouldn't say what the variables were. He didn't want to get too specific. He said they are the 12th or 13th in the nation in football revenue outside of TV revenue. But if you look at all revenue generated outside just TV money, they're 12th or 13th in the country and would be 4th in the Big Ten and would also be probably around 4th in the SEC as well. They asked him about unequal revenue distribution model. He said that absolutely will not work. He said we might make $5 or $6 extra million a year, but we're still $29 million behind the other two conferences, so it will not work. Talked about. They asked him about the grant of rights. Here's to me was the most important statement he made. First of all, he said it was the least of his worries, and he said it is not a document that keeps them from taking action.
Yeah.
And he would not go. He said, I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to tell you what that action is going to be. But he said, we have looked at this grant of rights. We put in work on this since last July, really right after the UCLA USC news broke. They kind of started this process, and they understand it. They have attorneys working on it. So it sounds to me like they have every intent of leaving the ACC. So, TJ, what do you think as an FSU guy?
Yeah, so I spoke with somebody back in August of last year, so August 1st today. So, yeah, it's been almost a year because I remember what weekend it was. I spoke with somebody well-connected at FSU. They happened to be in where I live here in Tampa, and we chatted over some drinks, and they told me at that time they felt like they could get – and everybody's magic number has always been 8, right? If you can get 8 of the 15, you can dissolve the conference, right? So they told me at that time they felt like they could get 5 for sure. They felt like they had 5 for sure. And we didn't talk about teams, but I think, Florida State, Miami, UNC. There's, you could find 5 teams, a year ago. I spoke with somebody around the time of the ACC Magnificent 7 came out, and they told me that at that time they knew they could get to 7, possibly 8. There's been rumors about Louisville or somebody being that 8th team. But yeah, so all that to say, yes, for the last year at least, or 2 weeks short of a year, Florida State's been trying to get out of the ACC or exploring possibilities or paths to get out of the ACC. I spoke with somebody, you mentioned the unequal revenue sharing. I spoke with somebody after the ACC meetings that was there at the ACC meetings. It's well connected with Florida State. And what Florida State wanted, which I think they knew they were never going to get. But what Florida State really wanted is they wanted unequal revenue sharing based on media and based on viewership. Florida State's been, for the better part of this decade, pretty bad, at least half of this decade. Until last year, they had 4 straight losing seasons. The year before that, Jimbo's last year, they had to reschedule a game against Alabama State or somebody terrible to make a bowl. And so for like 5 of the 10 years, Florida State's been pretty god-awful in the ACC and been a bottom feeder. And they've still led in viewership. And so Florida State's basically saying like, hey, I know Clemson's the real deal. I know Miami's got a brand. I know other teams have a brand, but like, we haven't even been good, and we've been propping this thing up. You got to pay us more, or we're going to look for a way to leave. And so they said, okay, well, we'll pay you a little bit more if you win a championship. And so Florida State's like, all right, that ain't cutting it. Like revenue sharing based on kind of a reward for performance just isn't what they were going for. Some people at FSU told me, hey, it's better than nothing. But it just adds nothing to, like in the grand scheme of things, we're trying to recruit against LSU and Bama and Auburn, and there's a $40 million gap in what we're doing versus what they're doing. And the $2 million we get from going to the play, like that's just not worth it. So anyway, I think all that to say, I think they are certainly looking, they've been looking, and that was my biggest takeaway from it as well. Hey, the grant of rights doesn't worry us, basically. When he said that, when I heard that he said that, I didn't watch it live, but I got the clips. When I heard that, I was like, oh, my goodness. But I will say, the caveat that I would say is that if Florida State doesn't, there's a lot of smoke around this August 15th date, which we can talk about that in a minute. If Florida State doesn't declare by August 15th, then I'd be willing to call a little bit of BS on that and say that if the grant of rights really doesn't worry you, that I've projected it at 420 to $620 million is roughly the worth of Florida State's rights over that time. If that doesn't worry you at all and you don't say that you're leaving by August 15th, then I call BS on that a little bit. I think that grant of rights probably is locking you in a little bit more. Okay. But we got 14 days to see if he'll call if they're going to call bluff here.
Okay. I got a super chat for you, TJ. Thank you to Country Roads 5150 here for the $9.99 super chat. He says, no slaw. I went to WVU MBA and Stetson Law, so spent a lot of time in Tampa. Is FSU challenging the extension of the grant of rights primarily?
I don't, and I hate to. I'm glad that you're a Tampa guy. I hate to sidestep this because I truly don't know what they're challenging, and I wish I had a better answer, especially since you did super chat, and thank you for supporting Couz's channel and keep doing that. I think that they're attacking the grant of rights from every angle possible. I think one of the bigger angles that they're challenging from is just the way that it was signed. Some news came out today that earlier this week on Monday specifically, some news came out that the ACC may not have held up all of their ends of the bargains when the grant of rights was signed, and the creation of the ACC network and how some of that revenue was going to happen. And so I think that that's a lot of what they're challenging with it. But I will, again, be fully transparent. I haven't had a ton of conversations on what exactly they're picking apart when it comes to the grant of rights and how they're going about challenging it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I've read all kinds of different things. I've read that the only change they made was just the end date. But I've also heard that they made other minor changes, and I haven't actually read it. So And I know it's supposed to be available to the public, is what I've been told, but I've never seen it. I did have someone send it to me the other day, or post it on Twitter or something, but I haven't had time. I'm to be honest, to read it. JJ, as a Pitt guy, and you're kind of on the other side of this argument, man. You would potentially, if Florida State would leave, say 2 or 3 other schools that have been talked about, UNC, Clemson, Miami, say they leave, you would be one of those teams that potentially left behind. As a Pitt guy, what are your thoughts? Do you think Florida? Do you call BS on this Florida State stuff, or do you think now there's actually some smoke here, and that Florida State is potentially looking to leave?
Yeah, I think it's at this point. I'm interested to see what they actually do. I know when you look at the number of teams, obviously the Magnificent Seven. You had David Hale talk about how really Brett Murphy, made that stuff up, creating the name for the 7 teams. I know personally through talking to my sources with Pitt, Pitt has explored other options. I know for a fact Pitt has explored if something were to happen to the ACC, if it was going to disband. I just think to get to 7 or 8 teams, it's going to be tough. And the reason why is that I think really you have the 4 to 5 teams guaranteed, I think really to look at the SEC or the Big Ten. But then you look at the other teams that are there, what's the benefit to jump into that? If I really had to put a name on it, would the Big 12 offer Pitt a spot in the Big 12? I think in heart of hearts, yeah, they'd have to, because I think there's clearly going to become an issue here pretty soon with West Virginia and Cincinnati in terms of, they're probably going to add the 4 corner schools in the Big 12. I think it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. The Pac-12 is in trouble in terms of, what came out today. It looks like to be a full-blown streaming on Apple, which is absolutely horrendous. No linear TV. They're in trouble. They can talk about all they want with, in terms of, we're going to hold these teams together. We're not going to go to these different conferences. They're going to be jumping ship pretty soon. I think personally right now, I've always been in the camp to say, I think it's more of a power play. In terms of what TJ was saying with the really, I call it like a success initiative. I think he's right. It's not really going to do much of anything. For me personally, I would love to have Pitt and the teams that have actually done well in the conference, especially recently, to get more money, and some of these other schools that really haven't done anything or not. What's really concerning is some of these schools not holding up their end of the bargain.
Right.
In terms of facilities, Pitt's put together $850 million worth of facility upgrades. They're now building on top of Victory Heights. There's going to be a plan within the next 2 or 3 years to bring another stadium to maybe not on campus, but there's, a whole entire facility upgrade in terms of what they're doing with fundraising there. Just some of these schools though that aren't participating need to give up maybe less money, is what I think. At this term though, I think there could be potentially smoke with everything that's going on. The one thing that did catch me a little bit, a friend of mine actually sent it to me today, Bob Thompson, who was the former Fox Sports CEO for a long time, was actually on 365 today, and he gave his thoughts, and he said, look, at this point, I think it's a power play. I think it's to try to get more money, especially unequal revenue sharing. Florida State, they haven't done well, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, but guess what? They do have the viewership. I mean, that's a fact. They have a very large fan base. They're a major brand, and when I look at the major brands in the ACC, I love Pitt. I think they have a great brand. But when you look at number one, I think it's North Carolina that has really that potential number one brand. Then you have Florida State. Then you have Clemson. Then you have Miami. Those are the schools. Then you have Duke that's there. But when you look at these teams, I just think that to say that the grant of rights is not a big concern is, I don't know. I think that's kind of pushing it a little bit, because if the grant of rights was not a big concern, they would have left 6 months ago. I think that's just what it looks like at this point. I think they're trying to get one more final push to get that money to try to get unequal revenue sharing. But from what Bob Thompson was saying today, he's like, I give it a 10 to 15% chance they leave because the money is so severe. And they said, I think what at this point too is when you look at what FSU is doing, I personally think it's a smart move, because here's what it does. It brings potentially ESPN's eyes to the table, because here's what's going to happen. In my heart of hearts, I think if FSU was to leave, it'd be going to the Big Ten. The big thing that scares them with that is that if they go to the Big Ten, it's going to be Fox Sports. Do you really want to have ESPN? You really want to have that team leave to go to the Big Ten and lose a viewership like Florida State, where ESPN is a 50% holder with the ACC network. Do you really want to allow that to happen? And I think what FSU is doing is really smart. Why would you not leverage this? Why would you not try to push this? Because the gap is at $30-40 million. You have to find some way to make it up. And right now, I think that eventually here, with ESPN no longer involved with the Pac-12, clearly it's going to be the problem with them. ESPN lost out on the Big Ten. You start to have to start pushing ESPN to say, look, you have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting there. It's either you fork up the money to make it competitive to where the ACC should be given a lot more money, hundreds of millions of dollars more compared to around the country. And you look at the viewership in the ACC, it's one of the highest in the Power Five. They have the most TVs. They have the most eyeballs of any conference in the Power Five. So I love what honestly, I like what FSU is doing. It allows to bring more people to the table and start pushing ESPN. But I just think that the grant of rights is too much. I really think it's a major upheaval.
Okay, fair enough. TJ, if you had to put a percentage on it, percentage that FSU actually does announce they're leaving the ACC.
By what date? Because before 2036 is 100%.
Yeah, right. Well, I should. Yeah, probably within the next year.
So I think one of two things. Yeah, I'd put it quite a bit higher. Then I think again, I'm with JJ there. I think that probably was the most shocking thing to all FSU fans, and just kind of reading Twitter and reading reading YouTube comments on a video this morning, like, oh my gosh, did you see that he said the grant of rights is no big deal? Again, if they announce they're leaving before the 15th, then he wasn't blowing any smoke. If they don't, if it's not a big deal, announce you're leaving tomorrow. Like, let's get out of here, or before the 15th. And for anybody watching that isn't aware, the 15th is the last day that you could announce you're leaving, and this be your last year. So if Florida State doesn't announce that they're leaving on August 15th, they have to play the 2024 season in the ACC. If they were to announce they're leaving tomorrow or anytime up to the 15th, they could leave after this year. So that's why there's smoke around that date.
Right.
So, yeah, if Florida State thinks the grant of rights is no big deal, they should just announce, right, but before the 15th and get it over with. And maybe that's what a lot of the conversations of the next 2 weeks are about with ESPN, with the Big Ten, with the SEC, to try and find that landing spot. But I think if I had to put a percentage on it, I'd say it's greater than 50% that Florida State announces before August 15th, 2024, right? So I think that I'd put it at 65, 70% that FSU announces that they're leaving before this time next year, right? To only play 2 more years in the ACC. The way that I think that the 30% it possibly doesn't happen is they're really scared of the grant of rights. They get slapped down in court, or the ACC does tinker with the revenue model. The ESPN comes back and does, kind of work on some stuff with the disparity between the ACC deal and the other deals that ESPN has, and kind of brings them up to par. But if things don't change, I think FSU will announce they leave before around, at the latest this time next year. What I've heard people speculate about is that Florida State will announce that they're leaving right after that August 15th date, so that they basically have 2 years to finalize what needs to happen next. It would be 22 months, not 24. But I've heard a lot of people speculate they'll announce right after that date, or weeks or months after, so that they have a full 2 years to get it done. So that'd be my guess. 70% is my guess.
Okay, that's fair. And if they do leave, they do announce they're leaving, do you think the odds are they land in the SEC or the Big Ten? Which most likely landing spot?
Man, I've always thought the SEC. I've always thought the SEC would be better. I've always thought they were a little bit more natural fit there. But it really does sound like the Big Ten smoke is just ridiculous right now. And so I think I'm leaning Big Ten at this point. That said, if ESPN's smart, I think they'll try and keep a hold of that brand. You were talking about some of the major national brands. If the Big Ten goes out and gets Florida State, and say they get Clemson as well, And you're looking at and we all know that Notre Dame's the big whale out there, right? And if Notre Dame joins a conference, everyone thinks it's going to be the Big Ten. If the Big Ten has Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Florida State, Clemson, Penn State, UNC, Oregon, that's better than the SEC. I'm sorry. I know that SEC homers may not believe that, but I mean, the SEC is Alabama, UGA, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida,
Auburn,
Texas A&M, Auburn. You're starting to get out of that national. Like, is A&M, Auburn, Florida? Are those like, those are national brand? But Tennessee's not a. So I don't know. I think that the Big Ten, the SEC is either going to buck up and pay up, or the Big Ten is going to be the premier conference here in the next 3 years. So I don't know. I lean Big Ten right now, but it's so crazy that it'll probably change in a week.
I appreciate that. Guys, reminder once again, we're joined by the gentleman that was just speaking is TJ Pittenger. He runs a channel called Double Fries No Slaw. He's just a Florida State channel. Go check him out at TJ Pittenger, at TJ_Pittenger, I'm sorry, on Twitter. Also go check his channel out. I've got JJ Kitchen here at the top of the screen here, who's a Pitt fan, and believe it or not, we have a West Virginia fan, a Pitt fan that gets along. Who would imagine?
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Exactly. But yeah, he has a channel called Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen, so go check his channel out. But I just want to get these guys on here and get their thoughts on this whole ACC Florida State thing. TJ, man, do you need to run, or do you want to talk about give your 2 cents on this Pac-12 situation real quick?
I will say I don't mind hanging out for a few more minutes. I'm not as well versed in all the Pac-12 stuff. You're the expert in that because it deals with the Big 12 so much more.
Right.
But
I
certainly don't mind hanging out. But I've probably got 5 or 10 more minutes. But I don't. Okay. Don't be coming to me for any Pac-12 stuff, man. I'm just pointing and laughing and saying like at least the ACC is not that bad.
I hear you. Yeah, you got a great point. The ACC is just kind of sick. The Pac-12's on life support. That's the comparison I would make.
It's bad.
JJ,
man.
Yeah, JJ, have you been following the Pac-12 situation?
I have, and it's again the stuff that just keeps dropping from there. One, we basically caught them. I mean, Kliavkoff basically got caught in a lie. He said he had a number of deals. They were waiting. More people were coming on board. And then the fact that today it came out that it's going to be more than likely 100% streaming, man, I mean, that's bad. I mean, that's like, you're not even going to touch. He was talking about trying to get like 30 to 35, potentially $40 million. He's not even going to reach 20. I think he's going to be around like $15-20 million. I don't know how, if the schools are already cutting their budgets, already saving their budgets, because they know that the potential ramifications of this deal are going to be so bad. I don't know. It's pretty bad. And at this point, they got Colorado to leave. I think that's more of Deion Sanders. Obviously Colorado was very good. They've had strong tradition in terms of a winning program, national championships, that kind of stuff. Obviously, it's been a long time. Since they've entered the Pac-12, they've been horrendous.
Right.
But I think at this point, I would be shocked within the next week we don't hear Arizona going to the Big 12. I think for this cycle, it's probably what you're going to see is those first 2 schools. And then the next cycle for probably next year, I would have to think more than likely. I would have to think you'd have Utah potentially on there. If they answer the phone, there's been a lot of speculation that they won't even answer the phone with the Big 12 because of the rivalry between them and BYU, which with the healthier program, if I'm the CEO of my organization, I'm not letting that stuff get involved. At this point, you either answer the phone call and start figuring out what you're going to do in the future, or you're a sitting duck. So at that point, I think it's going to probably be Arizona State and potentially one other school. I think they'll try to go after another one, but they're going to try really hard to go after Utah.
Yeah, my understanding, that whole answer the phone thing, Tim Fitzgerald, who's covers Kansas State for 24/7 Sports, site called Go Power Cat. He's the one who put that out there. He actually had an audio clip of a conversation about that. That conversation occurred at Big 12 Media Days. So he says that he said, surely to goodness, since Colorado's left there, they would now pick the phone up, you would think.
Mm-hmm.
So he's assuming that their stance has changed, but up until Pac-12 media days, they still had not answered the phone. So I found that pretty remarkable. Got another super chat here from Country Roads 5150. Thank you again, Country Roads, man. We appreciate the support here. If you guys, we've got 159 people on this stream here. There's no way for me to keep up with everybody. So if you want to make sure your chat gets read, you can drop a super chat just like Country Roads 5150. But he says FSU can pay the grant of rights with additional revenue from Big 12. If they go to SEC, ESPN will get its money from their SEC FSU games. Fees get reduced in court negotiations. ESPN failed with ACC network funding. That's a lot to unpack, Country Roads. Let's see if we can.
That's a lot.
I was going to say the same thing, man. You got like five. He got his money's worth there. He snuck like
absolutely.
5 points in there at one time.
We love it, man. We love it. Hey, if he's going to give me $9.99, he can do it again. All right. FSU can pay the grant of rights with additional revenue from Big 12. My opinion on that is the Big 12 revenue would not be enough to pay the grant of rights. I mean, you're talking what, 500 million, TJ, some gargantuan number.
Yeah, no, correct. It's between 420 and 620. And the Big 12's media packages, actually for the first couple of years, it's not even, over the course of 13 years, it equates out to be, I believe, $30 million in difference. So I think it's about $30 million more over the 13-year period. So you're talking less than $3 million a year. So no, it wouldn't. The Big 12. Now, there is the idea that the Big 12 would get a renegotiated TV deal if Florida State was to come, but even that would be split evenly amongst all of the teams. Again, unless okay. So he said mid Big 10. So yeah. All right. So yeah, you're
that
right
makes
on
sense.
that one. I'll agree there. Shut up. Don't forget everything else I just said. I agree on the Big 10. I was like, man, no way the Big 12. I'm not trying to put down Couz's channel here, but like Big 12 ain't got that kind of money.
No, I agree with you. I was hey, I'm real, man. I'm not going to pretend we're something we're not. And he says if they go SEC, well, it's back to the Big 10 a second. I've heard, and I don't know how true this is, but I've heard it from some pretty I think it's some media folks. I was listening to it. I listen to so many podcasts and channels I can't keep track. But I was listening to a show the other day, and it said something about the Big 10 apparently has this big war chest of money that they have set aside for certain things, and they could probably afford to help pay Florida State's buyout or grant of rights or whatever they need to do. Not all of it, obviously, but some of it. They could probably chip in and actually help them get it, where the SEC or may not have that, So I don't know. Have you heard that, TJ?
I haven't, but I will say this. He brings up a good point. Fees get reduced in court negotiations. A tweet came out from Swaim this week that said that they were going to negotiate it down to $300 million, which, again, from anywhere from 420 to 720, $300 million is not terrible by any means. If that's the case and they can negotiate it down, Big 10 maybe picks up $100 million of that, and then you're only paying $20 million a year for 10 years. I think that would be, that would be interesting. But yeah, I think that all kind of goes hand in hand, and we'll see kind of whether or not the Big Ten's able to help, how that works. I proposed something this morning on, Florida State joins the league. They're going to increase the revenue by X number of dollars. Well, instead of splitting that evenly, you could use some of that money from that deal up front to help offset that cost. That's kind of unconventional for sure. The other teams would have to agree to it, but instead of giving everybody $3 million of FSU's increased worth, put that towards the buyout, and that's $60 million a year for however long, and you kind of pay it down. So there are certainly creative ways to do that. And again, however much money the Big Ten has in their war chest would certainly help.
The issue, though, Country Roads 5150, and this kind of addresses the other part of your question, is even if they go to the SEC, Big Ten, whatever, the ACC is the one who owns their grant of rights. So if they go to another league, unless they do some kind of funky negotiations or something, like TJ is kind of talking about, it's going to be tough.
There's some dispute on that, though. The UNC's athletic director was on a podcast a few weeks ago, and I mentioned this in a video that I did on Saturday morning, And he said that ESPN owes the grant of rights. He said that we signed the deal to the ACC, and those rights were then sold to ESPN. So ESPN actually owns the media rights for every team in the ACC, which brings up another point. If that's the case, can ESPN tell Florida State, hey, you don't owe us anything. Pay your buyout, and we'll put you in the SEC. We already own your rights. Who cares? Now, that's speculation. I don't know, but I'm just going off of what UNC's AD said when he was on that podcast. If ESPN truly does own the rights, that's a pretty interesting angle of all of it.
It changes the conversation dramatically. I actually did a video kind of mentioning that yesterday. A blog I read mentions that same thing, and there has been some debate on whether that's accurate or not.
Yeah.
People like Bob Thompson says that he's negotiated a lot of those deals, and he's never even seen a grant of rights. The networks are never privy to a grant of rights. It's always between the conference and the schools. So there again, who knows if that's maybe he misspoke, or maybe there's something in that grant of rights that nobody knows. Other than the attorneys who have looked at it. So, JJ, you got any comment on that?
Yeah, man. It's tough, man. That's what's the toughest thing of the entire deal is just the fact that it amazes me that even this was even agreed upon, to be quite honest with you. I mean, in a business sense, 5 years is a long-term plan. You signed this for 20 years. I'm absolutely just shocked the presidents and the chancellors were actually like okay with this in 2016. And I understand that with the ACC network, they bumped it from 27 to 36, but still, even allowing that was just, overall, the deal was just bad to begin with. But I just think that when you look at the ESPN, how much they're involved, and Bob Thompson brought this up. He goes, when you look at even the buyouts, what is bringing ESPN to the table to allow even a reduction in the buyout? It's not like it's Oklahoma and Texas where you had Yormark come to the table and say, look, we want these guys out. We wanted to renegotiate it 2 years. 2 years before our rights come to an end. We want to show what it looks like without Oklahoma and Texas. Bob Thompson even talked about today. He's like, ESPN is so involved with the ACC network and the investment that's been put into the ACC. Why would they devalue their own brand? Right. They're already going through tough times. It's not like they're thriving with ESPN right now. That between all of the people that are getting laid off at ESPN and the amount of money that they've lost, it's just it's hard to look and I was kind of on the other side of it to where, hey, I understand why teams are going to leave. I can see why a negotiated buyout makes sense. But when a guy like that comes to the table and says, look, I've done this numerous times, and the fact that ESPN is so involved with this, and I think, the more he was even talking about it, he even said, I wouldn't be shocked if ESPN is forced to come to the table that says, hey, once the years go on, you can't get past. There's no way you can get past 2 or 3 years from now and not have a renegotiation or even make it somewhat competitive, because then at that point, you cannot lose Florida State, Clemson, UNC. You can't lose into the Big Ten because you have no media rights deal and distribution with the Big Ten anymore. It's all NBC, CBS. You're losing out. And then you don't want them to go to the SEC because then regardless, you're going to pay them more there. So you might as well come to the table now and figure out what's the best, what's the equation you can bring into this to say, how can we keep everybody happy? And I think that's what really FSU's doing. And I like what FSU's doing because now they're starting to force the hand a little bit. They're starting to jab it a little bit. And now you're starting to get into people's nerves and say, now it's kind of, you're sitting at the table going, okay, what is going on with the Big Ten? It's not just the SEC anymore where ESPN says, okay, well, we have their rights too. Now you're looking at the Big Ten and you have ESPN. I would have to think ESPN's a little nervous because once you battle that and once they're gone, it is what it is. And now you start looking at it from a different aspect where, Bob Thompson talked about today too. He said, look, if that team leaves, say Florida State leaves and they lose the viewership, ESPN's still stuck paying the same distribution. It's just one less team. So, but you're also going to lose the viewership of Florida State that brings in the revenue. So your options are very simple. You either make it right with Florida State, Clemson, the bell cows, the viewership, okay, in terms of revenue, or you lose them, you lose their viewership, you lose their revenue, but you're still end up paying the same amount of distributions as you are right now. So ESPN needs to figure it out.
So it could actually, there is a potential, it could actually benefit the other ACC teams financially if they do leave the conference.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that's what we brought up today.
Because and I actually mentioned it in my video, and I can't take credit for the idea. I was just reading a blog that someone else had written, but in that blog, Christopher Lambert is the writer's name. He had mentioned that. He said the ACC schools will have less teams to share the revenue with, so they'll actually come out ahead as well by a few $1 million a year.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Do you think if that was to happen, not to play devil's advocate, but I guess that's what I'm about to do. Do you think if that's what happened, like at that point, don't you think that ESPN would challenge that? I feel like ESPN would challenge that like legally. I think they'd say like, hey, the product that we paid for, like if Florida State and Clemson are gone, or say it's 4 teams, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and there's probably a trigger once it gets past 2 anyway. But if Florida State and Clemson win, it was just those 2 teams, I feel like ESPN would immediately challenge that in court and say like, hey, dog, like we paid kind of like your house, right? Like if you're paying on your house and then something drastic changes, tornado wipes off, like you work with the bank, like there's kind of clauses and insurance and stuff like that. Like, hey, our product is significantly reduced. We're going to challenge this. And so I mean, in theory, maybe better for the other teams, but at that point, I think that they would say, hey, we're backing out of this. You could take us to court and sue us. And I think any court, I don't pretend to be a legal expert, but I think in that situation, the court's going to say, yeah, like you guys don't have to keep paying what you were paying without those 2 teams there. That's my gut. I could be wrong on that.
I think they would definitely go to court too. But then guess what the ACC team is going to say? We wanted more distributions because we had better viewership. And even though you wouldn't let us go to the table, you still wouldn't be able to do it. I'm telling you, that's from what Bob was talking about. I'll tell you what, he kind of changed my mind quite a bit from what he was talking about. It's a double-edged sword. So you agree. Guess what? The ACC schools agree to that deal. The ACC network hasn't produced like it's supposed to. They're still stuck in that deal. You let this team get out, and especially especially one, I can tell you this: the ACC will fall apart the minute they allow a team, any team or any school, pay installments. If you allow a team to pay installments of especially like $30 or $40 million a year, they're done. They're done. ESPN is in such a bind. They better realize real quick, if these teams leave, they're on the hook. So they start. I'm telling you from what he was saying today, I kind of like get the feeling that like the way this is happening for a reason, they're going to start getting people to come to the table eventually here.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you, JJ and TJ, for that great conversation. TJ, I think it's. I know you got a role, man. I appreciate you joining us one more time. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, Double Fries, No Slaw everywhere. YouTube, podcast, social media. My name is TJ Pittenger. Check us out anywhere. But Couz, thank you so much for having me. JJ, it was nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to that game this year, man. I probably won't make it because I'm out of town every weekend in November, but I'm excited for that game. So good.
Me and you both,
luck.
man.
Not too much luck, but good luck, man. That should be a fun one.
It was nice being down there a couple of years ago. It was pretty cool. So we're excited to get you guys back up here.
Awesome, man.
So everybody go sub up Double Fries No Slaw on YouTube and go interact with TJ on Twitter at TJ_Pittenger, Pittinger. It's scrolling along the bottom of the screen there. So TJ, once again, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us here, man. And you have enjoy the rest of your night.
Awesome. Thanks, gents.
Thank you, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Now, I got a couple of channel members with comments here I want to address. This is going back to the PAC-12 topic. David Hackett says, and he's a channel member, by the way, guys. If you see the little badge by his name, that's what that. And channel members also get preferential, they get their chats read first. David Hackett says, Jason Shear reports today Jed Fish, Arizona coach, contacted all parents of current and future football players to tell them where they will be playing. Told them we don't do bad deals. Yeah, I saw something about that, David, as well. I read that same tweet. So it looks like Jed Fish is preparing his players and their parents to, hey, whatever happens, we're going to be fine. We're going to be solid. We're going to be stable. I think he even used the word stable in one of his messages to parents or his players too. So It looks like Arizona. The writing's on the wall that they're on their way out. I also read that Jason Shearer is saying that Arizona has went completely silent on him. They're not telling him anything right now, which is strange. All of his sources have clammed up and aren't talking. So, and let's remember, Arizona had that Board of Regents meeting tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be anxious to see if anything leaks from that meeting.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. But I think, Couz, you're right. I mean, I would just be shocked if you make a statement like that. We don't do bad deals, or we're going to be fine. We're going to be stable. I think the only way that you go into it, and to be quite honest with you, I would think that that Arizona and Arizona State are better culturally fit for the Big 12. That's just my opinion. But
yeah, I agree. You think who is now? Repeat that again.
I said I think Arizona State and Arizona. I think I think they're good culture fits for the Big 12 to begin with. So was Colorado. I was kind of shocked even when they made that move back in the day. I mean, that was a tough move to begin with. I didn't personally, I didn't understand it, but I think Arizona State and Arizona would look good there. I think Utah, if they actually put away their pride, I think they'd be a good fit. It's just some of these schools, man, just the Pac-12, which is for some reason, man, they just have this notion about them that they're better than everybody else. And I think there's some of them are going to learn the hard way. They're going to learn the hard way real quick, and it's going to be over.
Right. Outlaw College Football, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says ESPN has the rights to both SEC and ACC, so they could move Florida State and Clemson to the SEC and not lose any money. Correct. Yeah, that's a topic of discussion, man. A lot of people seem to think that. There's others who say the opposite. I wish I knew the answer. I really don't, though. But we will find out at some point here, maybe soon. Who knows? But yeah, I think Florida State definitely has a plan. What that plan is, we may find out. I'm going to get back to the Pac-12 thing here. Basically, to summarize for those of you who may not have heard the news, earlier this morning, the Pac-12 CEO group, which is the presidents, basically had a meeting. George Kliavkoff presented a deal. It was basically almost 100% streaming, if not 100% streaming. The numbers have not been shared. There are, I think it was Jason Shearer on 365 today said he thinks it's about 22 million is the base, and there's an option for incentives based on how many Apple subscriptions they get. So the couple concerns of that is, one, how many subscribers are you going to get for Pac-12 football? Number two, schools need to know what their budget, and athletic departments need to know what their budget is. They cannot plan and set budgets if they don't know what they're going to be making. So, that puts a whole matter of fact. I saw a clip today of Washington State's President Kirk Schultz in a meeting that they had a few months ago or a couple months ago, a Washington State meeting. They were discussing their finances, and he point blank said, "You can't budget off of projections. You have to have a number." So it doesn't look good for the Pac-12, man.
It doesn't, and it's kind of funny. They brought this up, and I think I saw it before I came on here, and I laughed out loud because, one, it will never be reached. I'd have to find it here. Someone actually tweeted it out. God, I have to find it. But did you see the total subscribers that need to subscribe to the Pac-12 net? Well, I guess the Apples for streaming to reach the Big 12 in media rights is 32.9 million. So basically, it's not going to happen. Right. It's not going to happen.
Wow, unreal.
Yeah. So I mean, they are in a really tough spot, man. I mean, and the fact is too, any team can really leave because they have less than a year. You have less than 12 months with any of these media rights for the media rights deal. They're in a bind. I think that they're in such big trouble that, if you did get that call, you need to jump on board. The question I think I have now for your mark is, where does the aggressiveness start to happen with the East? I think that's going to become a question now, because you have Cincinnati and you have West Virginia out there. You got to start, and one of the comments I liked, and personally, to be quite honest with you, I want to tell the West Virginia fans this. The athletic director, I'm blanking on his name again. Your athletic director right now.
Ren Baker.
I like him a lot, to be quite honest with you. I think he's actually handled this stuff as the best as he can, what's going on right now. And I love the fact that he went into those Big 12 media days and said, look, we're good with expansion, But you know what? We need to have a conversation about teams possibly closer to us because the traveling's not fair at this point. I mean, it's getting to be a little bit ridiculous. And now you're adding, potentially the 4 corner schools. You're going to have one more school. It looks like it's going to be Arizona, but you got to start looking to add other teams. And I think that, in terms of the Big 12, I understand what UConn brings with basketball, but the football question is pretty much in limbo. I think that's a very big question. I think Yormark may go after bigger fish, to be quite honest with you. I would be shocked.
Yeah. Outlaw College Football says if the Pac-12 loses 4 schools plus USC and UCLA, total of 6, they would lose their Power 5 status. It's very possible.
I agree.
Because they would have to backfill with group of 5 teams. And yes, I know that everybody's going to say, well, the Big 12 did the same thing, but yeah, but backfilling with three group of 5. I don't consider BYU really they kind of get lumped in with a group of 5, but I think they were a better program than a group of 5. I mean, they've been playing Power 5 competition for years as an independent. But you could say, if you want to say 4 group of 5s, but this is 6 we're talking about here. And
I just don't think they have enough members.
And the PAC wasn't strong enough in the first place to withstand it. I mean, the Big 12, yes, we don't have any blue blood schools, but man, we have some of the most passionate fans. Every program in the Big 12 has a very passionate fan base now. I mean, maybe Houston you could say is iffy, but I mean, the rest of them, I mean, even Colorado has passionate fans. I mean, they had like the 4th or 5th highest attendance at games last year, and they were 1-11. So, I mean, their fans love their Buffaloes, man, and they will show up. And with Dion there, it's going to be even better. So yeah, I mean, they could definitely lose that potentially, but I mean, it would have to get voted on, I think, by the other conferences or maybe even the NCAA. I'm not sure how that works, but they would have to get voted out of it, which probably wouldn't happen, but I don't know. I know in the public eye, they definitely wouldn't be anymore. Put it that way.
Yeah, it would be tough. And the thing is, though, even after Colorado left, the day of, they have a meeting, and they still couldn't vote. They still couldn't get a unanimous vote on adding teams. I just think that conference, I don't know if some of those teams are trying to self-sabotage it at this point just to get out of it and not have to sign a grant of rights and whatnot. I don't know what they're doing, but I mean, to not even be able to add teams, that's a big question mark at this point. Right. I mean, to not even get on the same page, it's very nerve-wracking. I think just, George Kliavkoff has just done a horrendous job. I think that the guy shouldn't, to be honest with you, shouldn't have that job. I know they probably can't fire the guy because no one's going to want that job. Right. But he's just done a horrendous job.
Absolutely. Jacob Yoho, thank you for the super chat. He says, I think WVU ends up in SEC because of travel. The only way I think we get to the SEC, Jacob, is if they expand to 24 teams. I think there are so many teams ahead of us on the wish list. They would have to go to 24. Then maybe we have a shot because we did almost get in 2011. We did come really close. Mizzou got our spot. But things have changed so much since then. You've got programs like North Carolina now that have risen up kind of ahead of West Virginia as far as a brand goes. Historically, we've been better at North Carolina than football, but you look at recent memory, we haven't. And then you look at their basketball brand, and you look at the fact they're in the state of North Carolina, which is one of the fastest growing states in the country. I think they would surpass us, unfortunately. And then this is going to hurt to say this, but every metric I look at, Virginia Tech is a better brand than West Virginia, and that hurts me to say it. I mean, it's like you must. Matter of fact, I want to stick something in my eye because I despise Virginia. I hate Virginia Tech worse than Pitt. Okay.
Oh man, that's saying something.
Well, they're an hour down the road, so they're kind of like
close, yeah,
from where I live. So there's a lot of Virginia Tech fans where I live, but yeah, I mean, if you look at TV viewership, they're ahead of us. It's very slightly. I mean, we're neck and neck with them, but they're ahead of us in TV viewership numbers. I think they have larger enrollment than we do, and I'd have to double check that one. But they're in Virginia. We're in West Virginia. I mean, there's just so many metrics that they're ahead of us on. Unfortunately, I think Virginia Tech would likely get a spot before we would. I could be wrong.
Here's what's funny about that, Couz. Honestly, here's what's kind of funny. If Clemson, let's say Clemson, and just theoretically here, and this was actually brought to my attention. This was a private conversation, but it was kind of something that was very interesting. If Clemson and Florida State leave the ACC and they go to the Big Ten, and they start creating that bubble where maybe they even add Oregon and Washington to try to create that super conference that they're trying to get. And I understand the Big 12 would the Big 10 would certainly have the brands, but still the SEC is the best conference because of national championships and actually winning. That kind of stuff's a big difference. But say that, the Big 10 adds Oregon, Washington, and then they add Clemson and Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
What's stopping, and you try to make that power play in terms of the Big 10 going between just across the country. What's stopping the SEC from grabbing the ACC and just saying, look, you know what, here, ESPN does a full-blown merger, grabs the ACC schools, and then you bring in West Virginia and you bring in Cincinnati, and you add the entire all-new markets along the East Coast with viewership.
You could even add UCF in that conversation, and even UConn maybe.
So what would be stopping them from stopping just entirely grabbing the East Coast and countering what the Big Ten does? I mean,
it's possible. At this point, man, anything could happen. I mean, Brett Murphy put out that tweet last night with the two eye emoji.
Yeah,
I got a feeling that didn't relate to the Pac-12 situation.
I don't think it did either.
Brett McMurphy's not the type of guy that puts out those types of tweets. So I think something big's on the horizon, and we probably just don't know what it is. But it could be Oregon and Washington, the Big Ten. It could be the Florida State thing. Maybe. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out in the next. Really within the next. I think the month of August we could see some things shake loose. Honestly.
Yeah.
Well, JJ, man, I know you're on a tight schedule. I appreciate you hopping on with us, man. One more time, let everybody know where they can find you.
Again, Couz, you always run a hell of a show, and it was nice coming home late from work and jumping on. So, again, guys, you can follow me at Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen on YouTube, or you can follow me on Twitter with JJ_Kitchen40. Guys, again, when you jump on to a show like this with Couz, man, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with people. Couz is one of the best, man. That's why it's always fun coming on here. I don't go on a lot of shows, to say the least. This is one of those because it's a great show. I mean, it's incredible. So thanks for having me on, Couz.
Well, thank you, JJ. Hey, we're only a few months, 6 weeks out, 7 weeks out from the Backyard Brawl. So I can almost guarantee we're going to be doing a Backyard Brawl preview show for that one, man. So
we certainly will.
Thanks again for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your night.
I appreciate it, brother. And to West Virginia fans, held a pit.
Oh, that hurts. All right. David Hackett says, Immaculate, you have been very busy tonight. Yeah, Immaculate's in the house, guys. Immaculate was over on the Big 12 Mafia show earlier. Unfortunately, I was not able to tune into that show because I was prepping for my own. But I will hopefully try to go back and watch the replay. Those guys do a great job. Immaculate, Moen Vision over there with Nathan Bomber Brown, the Big 12 Mafia show. Thank you for joining us tonight. And yes, it was a WP reunion of sorts here tonight, believe it or not. And yes, David, he has been all over the place. Outlaw of College Football says, will we start seeing contractions in the future with teams like Mississippi State, for example, who bring hardly any eyeballs, and replace them with like an NC State? Maybe, Outlaw, but I think it'll be 10, 15, 20 years down the road before we get to that point. I could be wrong, but it's going to be hard to do that, man. I mean, you got to think a lot of these teams, like Vanderbilt, for example. Vanderbilt was a founding member of the SEC. They may not bring a lot to the table outside of their academics, but they helped found that conference. So it's going to be hard to just boot them out. And most of these teams bring something to the conference, even if they don't have a great football program, But David Hackett says Immaculate would love Pitt and West Virginia together. Real quick, guys, I wanted to read some tweets. Most of you probably have already seen this, but some of you may not have Twitter, so I want to take this opportunity to read some of the tweets Jason Shear put out today regarding the whole, Pac-12 meetings and the whole bit. One thing he put out, he says, something I really want to know after the meeting, if this deal isn't good enough, how is it going to get better? Because basically what happened at the end of that meeting, George Kliavkoff asked him to give him more time, and they all agreed, because there's speculation that some of those schools wanted more time just so they could make arrangements, basically, to move conferences. But he says, at this point, if a deal is completed, it is a bad one. I can't see how you can justify heavy streaming less than the Big 12, and the only way to increase value is through subscriptions. Why would Oregon and Washington even consider that? So it's not looking good for the Pac-12 at all. There was another tweet I wanted to put out that was very interesting from he actually retweeted. I want to find it here. It was someone from Amanda Kristovich from Front Office Sports tweeted out, another expert industry source tells me that if the report of the Pac-12 Apple deal is accurate, it's still, quote, going to be tough on reach and distribution properties, end quote. So I'll be honest with you. I don't see how a school like Arizona has an open door to the Big 12 where they can get guaranteed games on ESPN and Fox. They can get guaranteed $31.6 million a year. They don't have to worry about, less than half their games on streaming. Their players are going to be playing their school is going to be promoted on national television, on linear networks. They can advertise their schools. They can it helps draw kids in for enrollment, helps increase their enrollment. So I don't see how this. I don't think the Pac will necessarily die per se. I do think they're in crisis mode, as I put in my thumbnail. I do think they will survive, but I think it's going to be filled with a lot of. I think you're basically going to be left with Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, maybe Stanford and Cal if they don't go independent or go Ivy League, and then they're going to have to come in and add some G5 schools like San Diego State, SMU, that kind of thing. Also, I wanted to have an article here I wanted to pull up for you guys that it was on ESPN today. I think it was Pete Thamel wrote on ESPN. We'll pull it up for you real quick about today's Pac-12 meetings. It says Pac-12 leaders presented with Apple streaming deal. After months of negotiations and uncertainty, Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff on Tuesday presented the conference's presidents and chancellors with a potential, primarily subscription-based Apple streaming deal for its television contract that expires after the school year. According to multiple sources, while several options were presented, the Apple streaming deal emerged as a likely leader at this point, bringing some clarity to a lengthy process that frustrated many within the league and ultimately played a role in Colorado's decision last week to join the Big 12. Monetary and exposure questions still loom, though, and outside pressure from the Big 12 remains. There are not expected to be any imminent decisions on whether this TV deal is enough to appease Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah, which are being heavily courted by the Big 12. The Arizona Board of Regents, which oversees Arizona and ASU, is scheduled to meet later Tuesday, but no decision is expected after the meeting. According to sources, the first year of what's expected to be a relatively short-term contract with Apple would start in 24-25 and begin relatively low relative to the league's hopes. But the deal, sources said, would incrementally improve and potentially be competitive with its peers in the Big 12 and ACC down the road, provided certain subscription numbers are met. When the Big 12's new TV deal begins in 2025, those schools will see an increase to an average of $31.7 million. That has long been the barometer at which the Pac-12 deal was expected to be measured. After the meeting Tuesday morning, there remained ambiguity about the potential value of the Pac-12 deal because of the unknown variance of subscriptions. Sources familiar with the negotiations told ESPN the Pac-12 is in a better position now than it was a month and a half ago to sell digital subscriptions thanks to changes in the media landscape. Kliavkoff said recently at Pac-12 Media Days in Las Vegas that the longer the league waited, the better the options became.
From family get-togethers to weekend getaways, Ford vehicles help you get more out of your summer. And during the summer,
there's an underlying shift in the media market that's happening, and we're long-term taking advantage of that. An Apple spokesperson did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Apple has dived into sports rights in recent years. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, here we go. The uncertainty in the Pac-12, meanwhile, has been magnified by the Big 12's unabashed interest in the possibility of further conference expansion and its six-year, $2.2 billion television deal with ESPN and Fox and runs through 2031. Here's something talks about Arizona and Jed Fish. It says the realities of the decision also emerged on campus Tuesday as Arizona coach Jed Fish addressed local media about the start of training camp and took multiple questions on realignment. Fish told local reporters that he video conferenced with the families of his players to assure them that clarity on the future would emerge soon. He said a guiding force in the process would be stability wherever we land. So that was the article written by Pete Thamel and Heather Dinich at ESPN. Wanted to share that with you guys just in case you had not seen it yet. So, doesn't look good for the Pac-12. I don't expect any major decisions to be made. Probably won't hear anything tonight, tomorrow. Could potentially hear something by the end of the week. I mean, it's only Tuesday at this point. Wouldn't surprise me if we see Arizona announce by the end of the week they're leaving the league. So be on your lookout for maybe some new Board of Regents meetings to pop up. I haven't had a chance to go listen to Greg Pflugar's show that he did earlier tonight. I'm anxious to hear what the Arizona State Money Perch had to say about the situation. An ad blocker. Oh yeah, sorry about that, guys. I don't know how that happens, but anyway, Outlaw. I don't even know how to do that. I would have to research it. I'm not real good with technology, so this stuff's all foreign to me, to be honest with you. But I can Google it and figure it out. Outlaw College Football says basketball was off the chain in the old Big East script. I'm an SEC guy, and even I wanted to see St. John's versus Georgetown, Villanova, Seton Hall, etc. Yeah, and that's, we all know Brett Yormark is a basketball guy. He wants to make this league the best basketball league in America. Many think it already is. He wants to strengthen that, use that to differentiate the Big 12 from all other conferences. He knows they aren't going to catch the Big 10 and SEC in football money, but can he somehow leverage basketball to at least close that gap and narrow that gap and make, give the Big 12 something that they can differentiate themselves in to at least put themselves in a clear third place among the Power 5 conferences. It is not a West Virginia State shirt, Creighton. Someone else, I know you probably weren't on here, but at the beginning of the show, I said, hey, this is not a Georgia Tech shirt, and it's not a West Virginia State shirt. It's actually a shirt I wore when I coached my daughter's rec league team. We were the Yellow Jackets. And it still fits me, and it's really comfortable, so I got it on. But Outlaw says Florida State was scared of the SEC. They dodged the SEC in the 90s. They turned the SEC. They've turned the SEC down multiple times, which is extremely interesting that they may end up there. It's another reason I think a lot of people are saying they may end up in the Big 10 because the SEC may not want them because of all the times they've turned them down. They may remember that. Outlaw says Bluefield State may be make it AAU status. Maybe we'll see. Bluefield State's my alma mater, by the way. I guess he remembers that. Well, guys, I don't have a whole lot much more to talk about on here. If you guys have anything else you want to talk about before I get out of here, throw me a super chat, and I'll be sure to address it. Guys, if you want to take advantage of the perks of being a channel member, go become a member of the Couz's Corner VIP Club. Go hit the join button right below the live stream here. Join. It's an easy way to support the show. $2.99 a month or $4.99 a month comes right out of your bank account or right out of your PayPal or whatever. It's an easy way to support the show here. If you want to, instead of having to do super chats and things like that, you can just become a member, and boom, right out of your account goes right in. And it's all the money goes right back into my show. And I would really appreciate it. Obviously, super chats is a good way to support me as well. There's under the on-demand videos, there's a little button called the thanks button. I call it my tip jar. If you want to drop me a tip, you can always hit that super thanks on my videos as well. I've got a merch store. Be on the lookout for some sales in my merch store. Have an idea for a new merch design. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. I've just been too busy. Thank you, Immaculate, for hopping on, man. And everybody go check out Outlaw of College Football's channel, by the way. I forgot to plug him. He's a channel member here at Couz's Corner, but he's also has his own channel called Outlaw of College Football. Very entertaining, so go check it out. Immaculate does a lot of work over at thank you, David. I appreciate you hopping on, man. Immaculate does a lot of work over with Big 12 Mafia on his channel, so go check that out. The Big 12 Mafia and Holy Rival Show. Very good content over there. Outlaw says Pac-12 will expand to the far east and grab the Nagasaki egg rolls from the Japanese American Football League. Woo! That would, yeah. I love. Hey, Nagasaki egg rolls, man. They can ball out. Mike Smith said he's seen that Fairmont was going to honor some of the scholarships from Alderson Broaddus. Yeah. For those of you that aren't familiar with West Virginia stuff, we have a Division II school here called Alderson Broaddus College or Alderson Broaddus University, whatever it is. They actually are having to they're basically having to canceled all scholarships. They sent letters to their students saying your scholarships have been canceled. The school's having to shut down. And Fairmont State, another state school in the state, has stepped up and are going to honor those scholarships for those Alders from Brada students. So that was a very, very kind gesture for the folks there at Fairmont State here in West Virginia. Crypt Keeper, man, I missed you. I hadn't seen you in forever. Thank you for jumping on. He says, Big Blue, great show tonight. Yeah, man. Crypt Keeper was probably one of my first channel subscribers, man. He's been here from the beginning. I used to see him on my live streams all the time. He kind of disappeared on me for a while. Now he's back. Thank you, Crypt Keeper, for the support. Guys, I think that's it for me on the show tonight. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate all the support. Everybody, make sure you hit the like button on your way out if you haven't yet. That'll help this channel continue to get views later on. And I want to, just thanks to everybody for the chats. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for all those that were in here participating. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel here, guys, if you haven't yet. Be sure to subscribe to the channels of my guests, Talking Football with JJ Kitchen and Double Fries No Slaw with TJ Pittenger. Be sure to subscribe to Outlaw of College Football. With that, guys, I appreciate it again. Thank you all. Couldn't be where I'm at without you. I look forward to hopefully bringing you another show. I may even be able to do another one tomorrow night. We'll see. But especially if something breaks tomorrow, I'll try my best to do a live show. A lot of it may depend on how I feel because I do have to do a lot of traveling tomorrow. But with that being said, guys, thanks again. I'm out in Q Country Roads.